Greetings, and welcome to I Am AI. Are you? This special online discussion about generative AI in art is being presented in conjunction with the exhibition at the Escondido Arts Partnership Expressions Gallery. Thank you for joining us. All right, I'm gonna introduce Mr. Joe Nalven. He's our leader today. Go ahead, Joe. Let everybody know what we're doing and what we've done.
So the idea is been trying to set up an exhibit or participate in an exhibit about generative AI. I think it's about time that there be some places that would explore the variation or what people are doing with it. And I was enlightened at the discussion last year at the Oceanside Museum of Art by a panel, which several were on there. And that's really where I jumped off. And it's really been a short process when you think of a year's time. But like many of us, we're building on other experiences with art and media. So in that sense, it's a tool that we're adding into or integrating with what we're doing. So in that sense, I've been writing several articles about that, just kind of give you my background at Minding the Campus and also here at the Times of San Diego. I was particularly interested about the San Diego County Fair because that had been a place for digital art as the kind of as a bastard child of image making starting about 20 years ago, and became an adjunct to the photography exhibit in a separate room, but where people could experiment and do their thing and have their awards there. So it seemed to me that in that same spirit that the San Diego County Fair, the photography group, would be open to this new tool set. And I wrote about it in the Times of San Diego, kind of stating that they were not interested. There was a fear factor, the fear of litigation potentially. Someone might claim that their image was trained on their image. And potentially also the difficulty of how do you evaluate these images in a meaningful way. So what the question came to us, to me, was go hither, go thither, go someplace else, find your own venue, which we already had because the Escondido Arts Partnership was very open to having art. If it's art, it can go up on their walls. And so for those of you who don't know, the Escondido Arts Partnership has multiple galleries. Its main gallery, and then there's a sub-gallery for the photo arts group, and then there's other individuals who rent different spaces to do their art shows, but they have a common reception the second Saturday of the month. So I figured, well, that is a place that we could just simply take over one of the galleries in the back, called in the Expressions Gallery, the space in between. It's a 19-foot wall, and we could explore with a range of different images and have a conversation about it. Because it's not just simply putting images up on the wall and say, oh, look at this pretty image, or trying to sell images. It's really, we're at the point in the development or the expression of generative AI is to talk about where we are on the trend curve. It seems to me that even though it's been in the development for many years, we hit a breakthrough point a few years back where people are now saying, well, it's art. The hardest question of being art. So the idea was to get people doing it at either minimal amount and total amount with text prompts and hybrid approaches to get a variety of different usage of this tool set, and then talk about that and see where we are. So that's the background of this conversation today. And the idea is not to get locked into any position, but to really push this thing around and see where it takes us and where is our comfort zone with it. Well, anyway, that's my 2 cents for an introduction. Larry.
All right. So Joe asked me if I would say a few words before we get started looking at the images. I'll start off with thanks, Joe, for making all this happen. I think it's great that you ended up finding a place where we could do a show. I love the response that we got at the San Diego Fair. It was like, yeah, look somewhere else. And Joe's like, yeah, we already have. We've done it. And so I kind of feel like we're at a point right now that kind of everybody who's a photographer went through this transition where we went from darkroom to digital. And there was a lot of sort of talk about, Photoshop not being real photography. And I think a lot of that same issue stuff we're hearing again with the advent of AI. And like Joe, I think the thing that I'm most excited about and a reason why I've been doing critique nights for a lot of years, and I added in an extra one this year is our DPX AI group. And they are, both of my DPX groups are on the meetup pages. And the big reason for me to have this AI group put together for the meetup group is because I'm anxious. I'm really anxious to see what I'm going to use the term, more creative people than just everybody sitting there, clicking prompts into these AI generators. But I'm really interested in real creative people who see this tool as a potential of something brand new. And I think, again, the more we do these sort of things like Joe has put together here, we talk about it, we see what other people are doing. This all becomes an inspiration for us. And I think that we will grow from these experiences. And I think that as we begin to use these tools from a more creative aspect, I think we're going to be really blown away by its possibilities. I love the idea that Adobe, when they first adopted the whole AI thing into Photoshop, they put out sort of I think a pretty bold statement. It said the way that we create will never be the same. And I said, amen. It's like everything has kind of again changed thanks to, again, this brand new technology. And I'm just super anxious to see where it goes. And so that's my 4 cents worth. So what we plan to do tonight is rather than spending a bunch of time, I think, and Joe and I had talked about this, rather than spending a bunch of time, again, trying to argue about whether AI is stealing images from other artists or whether AI is ethical or whether you can't copyright an AI image as of yet. It's all slowly changing and evolving, and we're anxious to see where it goes. But I think tonight the discussion, I'm hoping, will be centered more around the work that we're going to show you that each artist put into the show. And I think realistically, everybody in the show is using it in a very different way. And so I hope that this also inspires people in the audience to want to get a little deeper involved and see what it can do for all of you too. So that's that. I will advance my slides here because I forget where I'm at in terms of what I'm looking at. So the first image that was in the exhibit that probably a lot of people saw right away was Joe's image, which became the title card, was I am AI, are you? So I thought we'd let Joe talk about the creation of that piece that we used on the title card.
Yeah, so I use different platforms and do different things with it. And so in this particular case, I used a text prompt in Firefly. And if you look closely, you'll see some orange glow behind this woman. The orange glow is actually another woman. But I was attempting to get rid of it and just have the lower image. But then when I looked at the image, I said, well, actually, that looks pretty good, leaving the orange glow there, even though it's kind of faded out. So what I think is important to me is the surprise factor. Whether or not this is fine art, one could like the image and use it as a surprise, as a jumping off point to what one would like to do in different frameworks. Obviously, we're imposing different kind of metrics or understandings of what counts, whether it's a copyright metric, a curator metric, commercial value, the provenance question. How provenance takes on a different meaning in the history of fine art versus provenance in terms of how this image was created, or just from the point of view of creativity, which I define as following Arthur Koestler's book, The Act of Creation, way back in 1964, informed play. So we're playing with this tool set, but it's informed. It's not just simply children's play or the naive person playing with it, but coming from a mature sense of what we do with art. So that is kind of what I see as kind of leading the discussion when I fell upon this image, saying, well, this is a striking image, especially since her eyes don't really match up as they ought to in a human being, kind of as a sly comment on what we get and what we try to fix in generative AI, or maybe not fix because it looks better not fixed. So anyway, that's the starting point, and I thought that that was a compelling branding image for the show.
Excellent. Let me see. I was trying to go back here to make sure I had my things in order. So there's a photograph that Joe took of the exhibit with the title piece on top. And I spoke to Joe earlier today, and I thought, well, hey, the best way I think to do this is we'll just sort of start from the left side of the wall and work our way towards the right side of the wall. And so now, as it turns out, on the left side of the wall is Kazmier Maslanka's image, and he is not here tonight unless he snuck in under somebody else's name. I don't see him. I can kind of give a brief description of what his image is about, I will say. Actually, before I do that, because this was an interesting thing to lead into it, and Joe and I talked about, Don Archer was one that was going to be in the exhibit, and I'll let Joe tell the story, but I thought we would start with his work maybe before we actually get into the pieces of the exhibit.
Right. For those of you who don't know Don Archer, he is the owner of the Museum of Computer Art, the largest location of computer art for the last 25 years that's online. And so I thought it would be useful to have that kind of legacy connection with what we're doing. Unfortunately, at the Escondido Arts Partnership, you have to be a resident of the County of San Diego. So even though I invited him, I had to apologize and say, well, we'll get you into this discussion. And so he had a few words about his images. I selected these from among the many that he has online. And he has, if you're interested, you could send in your images there, and if he likes them, he'll post it to his museum there. Okay, so this is Don. To explain my interest in AI art, I first have to go back to my enthusiasm for fractal art, which I practiced for maybe 20 years. And then he goes into a discussion of fractal art, which we're familiar with in terms of the Mandelbrot set, which was promptly loaded into programs for the amateur like myself, who could then input their own randomly chosen numbers into the set. The results were astonishing. We were establishing a whole new view of art. Now, of course, going back in your mind, you just said, okay, that's an algorithm, plugging in numbers. We're using algorithm, but plugging in words. We're kind of have kissing cousin situation with the fractals. Artificial intelligence is a collection of algorithmic and mathematical systems using complex programming and the distributive power of the cloud to mimic human intelligence. There is nothing mystical about it. Web programmers have relied on it to build digital art programs that convert text to art, and I have used such programs as DALL-E, Midjourney, and Wombo Dream. These images are all coming out of Wombo Dream. for just this purpose with a light reliance on one or two graphic programs to adjust color and size if warranted. It has been said that AI is already sentient, that is, that it has achieved human feelings or emotions. But that is nonsense. I don't know what the future will bring, but right now, the humanity of AI art is just a wishful dream. Meanwhile, I have created an art site and posted to the web of hundreds of AI images, mostly of people known or unknown, by simply entering verbal prompts into the AI program, just as I entered random numbers into a fractal art program. I produce portraits by the thousands and delete almost as many, some so bland they resemble photographs of the subjects, and some so distinguished that I think of them as fine art. I love it. History will confirm or deny my efforts. So that's Don's take on his use of Wombo Dream.
I wish Don was here. Great conversation. Interesting. All right. Now I will move on to Kaz. He's not here tonight. He had the first image that was on the left side of the exhibit, as you saw. So Kaz does this very, and he would need to explain it, very complex thing that he calls mathematical poetry. And so you might recognize the algebraic setup here, but he's using words, and I won't even attempt to propose that I could tell you exactly what this thing means, but he always creates images that go along with this mathematical poetry. And when he actually shared this image in the making of it when we did the discussion at OMA that Joe had mentioned earlier. And he said that his goal was to get the snake and the apple and in the image, and he thought of several ways of doing that. I'm going to mute Eric there. And he thought of several ways of doing that, and none of them were doing what he wanted it to do. And then he decided to take a stab at using AI, and I think he ended up generating the snake and the apple separately and then put them together to create the final image. And so he became intrigued with this concept of what he could do with an existing project, I guess, that he's been working on for many years, these mathematical poems, if you will.
Yeah, I think I would add that he tried to generate the apple and the snake together, but was unsuccessful. So
Yeah.
he stuck with the snake and then took a photo of apples and many and stuck the apple in the mouth.
There we are.
Of the snake.
All right. Takes a village to explain Kaz. Say it again, Greg.
He removed the fangs of the snake.
Oh, okay.
Too. So yeah, a little bit of Photoshop.
All right. Let me get back into the.
Yeah, I remember. I asked him about why there were no fangs.
Yeah.
At the reception, and he said he wanted to make it look more enticing and not scary, because then he wouldn't want to come get the apple if it was too scary. So he took the fangs out.
All right. Right, next on our list was Mr. Jack Quintero.
First of all, I apologize for the phone ringing a few minutes ago. It only rings when I'm online in a symposium. I'm sort of glad I'm going early on in the list, because I think I have the least experience with AI of the whole group. About a year and a half ago, I started a flirtation with AI, and it went the way of most of my high school dates. It fizzled out pretty early. Anyway, this piece, the tubes were chosen specifically because of all the text in them. And at that time, AI didn't do text. I don't know what it does now. I haven't done any AI in a year and a half. I'll just say that up front and try to explain why. The rest of it it's an AI studio. And I sort of like the juxtaposition between the AI studio and the real paint color tubes. That's how the thing came about. I did a still life of the tubes against a 50% gray background, and then moved the AI in behind it and around it and so on. So the table, the brushes, the easels, the bookshelves, the chair on the left, all of that is AI. Only the tubes themselves are photographs. I think it's interesting. Anyway, I did a few AI things earlier than this. I was very clever by, putting a panther in my Death Valley landscapes and a jogger in the middle of my Moab landscapes. I do landscapes mostly, and I had a good time doing that, and that was all fun. Some other experiments I had combining real with AI consisted of an AI art gallery with my own works hanging in it, and a movie theater with my own movie starring Randolph Scott in the middle of that. And these were all fun for me. I did a few of them, and I entered this one in the show just because, I entered the show because I wanted to encourage Joe and help him get this thing going, and I'm really glad I did, and I'm really glad he did. It's been a lot of fun. And I think this particular image has a little bit of mystery to it, maybe. When we had our reception the other night, some people were asking me, well, is it real? Is it not real? And it looks like the whole thing is real. And I explained that already. Then I stopped. This might have been the very last piece I did in AI. And I just stopped. It wasn't a hard, fast decision that I made. My interest in it just sort of faded away. And I never really examined why. And maybe you all can help me with that tonight. I never felt a real connection to the pieces I was doing. I had a beautiful panther in the middle of, I think it was Valley of Fire maybe. And people would look at it and say, wow, that panther's too big. And nobody would say, what the hell is a panther doing in the middle of Valley of Fire? So it was a different reaction than I expected. I didn't feel a connection to the things that I was doing that came close to rivaling what I felt with my other kind of work. When we were hanging this show in the EAP in Escondido, there's a sign on the wall in the front gallery, and the sign reads, if you'll pardon, I left my phone in the other room. All right. I had a picture of it, so I'm just going to, there's a chart. It says the 7 elements of art. And here they are: line, color, shape, form, value, texture, space. And I looked at that, and I looked at this image of mine, and I said, well, yeah, it's got line, it's got color, it's got that. So, but that list is incomplete because this picture has luck, and luck isn't on that list. And as I began to think about that, I think that's why I might have lost my interest in AI. Shakespeare didn't luck into the middle quatrain of Sonnet 73. Da Vinci didn't luck into the Gioconda smile. And Michelangelo didn't luck into David's pose. But I lucked into this background. I didn't create it. I typed in a couple of prompts. I think it took maybe 3 or 4 stabs at it. So, but it's a really important part of the piece, but it's not mine. And I think that's why I never felt a real strong connection, even though I think this is a more serious thing than my Panther in the Desert stuff. Joe called it surprise, and I've been thinking of it as luck, and I'm more than willing to be talked out of that. So that's all I have to say.
All right. Even amongst ourselves, we have we have some variations on, I think, the acceptance and the use of, and I mean, this is, I think, something that every artist goes through, no matter what medium you're playing with. I mean, I look at some of, we hadn't planned on making any statements about each person, but I was inspired by what Jack was saying. And I think, about when art sort of transitioned from that very painterly, almost photographic, realistic painting. And you think about when Jackson Pollock, and I think about your term luck, when Jackson Pollock, accidentally dribbled some paint on the floor and then went to work doing it on a canvas. So I think I would kind of take an exception to Jack's comment that I do think there is a lot of luck. There is a lot of accidental things that happen in art. I think the beauty of it is that we as artists carry, I think, a different reaction to those sort of elements that happened when art happens in front of us. And that startling thing when it happens, and then, like I talked about earlier, I'm anxious to see, as more and more artists get involved with this process, what more they do with it. So, yeah, love it, Jack. I think that's all part of the battle of art, is also self-doubt and all that stuff that goes along with it.
If you can look for the Jackson Pollock analog
Yeah.
in poetry, let me know if you find it.
All right. Okay, thanks, Jack.
That
Let me get to here.
my pleasure too. I'm enjoying this a great deal.
Next up is Mr. Greg Klamt.
Thank you. This is called Memories of Home, and it was created with Midjourney, beginning with Midjourney, and then finished out in Photoshop with using Photoshop Generative Fill plus my standard digital illustration techniques. I think Jack's the tensions that Jack talked about in, and I think will continue to be part of this conversation, is the tension between what is mine and what is the machine. It continues to be a back and forth thing for me. Some days, when I'm playing with the AI stuff, it feels like mine, or it doesn't feel like mine at all at first, and then it comes to feel a little bit like mine as I work with it. I may begin with a prompt, and I may spend hours prompting something to get it closer to what I had intended. But it never starts out as what I had intended, or almost never, and then it ends up somewhere developing into a new story as I go along. And this one was, oh shoot, I lost the prompt. The initial prompt for the head in the middle of this was something about like destruction of the world, or something along those lines. And it was more creative than that. But that's how I got the face. And then I started building on the face. The eyes were discombobulated, and I brought that into Photoshop. And I think it had a little bit of the foreground and the head, and it was just a square image. And then I used Photoshop Generative Fill to start building out little pieces of the landscape around it, and changing the textures, improving the textures that were in the face, and improving the eyes, and then repainting some things, and then adding different things to the head as I was thinking about the concept. Once I thought of the idea, the memories of home, of this person, in this desolate place, remembering back to how they ended up there. And so that main figure in the face in the center, and the building down the just to the left of the eye, was all part of that original image, but it has been altered significantly through just this iterative process of generative fill without any prompts. And then the background, the green and gold sky, was a tornado that was also created in Midjourney and then brought into Photoshop. And then there's some other textures that were also created in Midjourney and overlaid in that to sort of augment the texture in the clouds. But a lot of the foreground, I went back in and repainted the rocks and detailed things and brought out more of my style in the texture and repainted some things in the eyes. And as I work it, as I process it, as I make a selection and say, I want to prompt this, I would have gone through and used cloning and dodging and burning and smudging and a variety of different tools if I were painting from scratch. And the more I do that, the more it becomes my work. And this is something that I wouldn't have probably painted from scratch, not with this detail necessarily, but it's an interesting thing because it now feels like my style and it feels like my work, and I was okay with signing it with my name, and yet there's a part of it that is still, it's like I don't feel like it's mine in the same way as if I had done 100% of it from scratch, even though I spent probably 30, 40 hours on it. But I've always struggled with this continuum. Sometimes I did graphic design for a living, and I'm in that condition. I'm making art. I'm making images, usually for other people, and I'm using a combination of stock photography and my stuff, and I'm laying things out, and I'm changing, I'm cropping, selecting, bringing out details in those things to tell a story for somebody else. And this is not really any different than that. Now, graphic design is not fine art. But it is still art. It is still design. I wouldn't try to pass it off as fine art, but there have been graphic design exhibits in fine art museums. So, who's going to draw that line? And I, as an artist, I'm drawing that line all the time, and then erasing it, and then finding new ways to just ignore my biases and try to move beyond them and do something new and just keep developing my process in the creation of the work.
Greg, I wanted you had made a comment to me that you hadn't exhibited for a number of years, and it seems to be that this has enticed your imagination to travel down that road again.
Yeah, and I wasn't even creating new art for over 10 years. I was doing some, but really not completing things. And when Kaz and Valo contacted me about being on the panel at the OMA, the discussion at Oceanside Museum of Art last year, and then asked me to be the moderator for it. And I had a little bit of introduction to some AI through Deep Dream Generator in 2017, where you could upload a photo of your own and then apply a style to it of some famous painter like Kandinsky. And I played with that a little for an afternoon, and I got bored of it because it really wasn't mine. It was something that I put up. It was purely algorithmic, and I just dismissed the whole AI thing. But once I started playing with the AI and seeing what can I do with this, and pushing myself and the prompts and the limitations of the software, and it became really exciting because it was kind of like a toy at that point for me, because it was new, it was easy, I could get really interesting results fast. I realized that it's a great tool for ideation, for imagination, for inspiring me to get ideas. And I can always take something that I get out of the AI and repaint it in my style, as I have started to do with this stuff. And if I really felt connected enough to this and wanted to do something and exhibit it as fine art, well, I guess I did that last week. We put it up on the wall in an art gallery, so it's fine art, and yet I still feel kind of unsettled with it. But it is inspiring me, and I like the image. I like the dynamics of it. I like the color. I like the and it feels good just to be creating again, however that inspiration comes. And I've always found different ways. I've been doing art for 50 years, and there's, when I hit a wall creatively, it like, go try something else. Try painting, try music, try performance, try writing, and this is just another utensil in my tool set to kind of get ideas going and then see where it goes as I get drawn into what happens there. I can throw some paint at a canvas and then keep working on it. And, throwing paint at a canvas isn't that creative. But if it inspires me to do more and put more of myself in it, then I find it beneficial. And that's what happened here.
All right. Thanks, Greg. I'm beginning to wonder if we're all struggling with the same thing before we get to the end of night. So it'd be interesting to see. I also wanted to say, I forgot to mention before we move on to the next one, because I did put a slide in here. Stephen, do you want to tell us about the giveaway we're going to do tonight? You're muted. You're still muted, Stephen.
Okay,
There you
I
are.
apologize. Okay. Yes, the Intros Pro by Wacom. Thank you very much to Wacom. They've gave us a little product support for a presentation. So some lucky person is going to win an Intros Pro tonight.
And I'm going to say Stephen has the challenge of figuring out how he's going to do that.
I guess I have an idea, but you can do that at the end.
All right.
You can always do I'm thinking of a number between this and that, Stephen.
There you go.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I like that idea.
I'm thinking of a number of pixels between this and that. All right. Well, thanks, Steve, for making this happen.
You're welcome.
All right.
My pleasure.
All right. Next on our list after Greg was Jill, or is Jill.
Yay.
I still am.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. So this piece is self-portrait. And as you can see, I took a rather literal approach to the name of the show. Somebody had to do it, and I'm not clever like my colleagues, so I just dove right in to the idea of addressing the question of, is creativity something that will always and only be the domain of humans, or will AI be able to achieve true creativity? And what would that be? Will that happen? We don't know, because I think that this new genre is very much in its infancy, and it's going to be changing dramatically, I think, and I just have no idea, but it's kind of exciting to see where we're going, at least in terms of the art world. I'm not sure about other areas where it's maybe truly scary, but for the art world, I think it's a very interesting new media, and I'm glad to see it starting to get some, well, this is the first show of its kind here, at least in San Diego, so I'm glad that, I'm grateful to Joe and all the artists that participated to make this happen. I think it's very interesting, and I know there's a lot of people that are interested in it. But so what did how did I use AI for this image? I did some talking, some chatting with the chat bot to start with, because I wanted to flesh out my idea and get the AI's ideas and thoughts about this concept. of this image I wanted to do. And the surprising takeaway I got from the chatbot was that the chatbot was very resistant to the idea of AI being being capable of being creative, and it said that's really the domain of humans. And if a robot was painting its own image, it would be the result of programming and not creativity. So I thought that was interesting, but I think maybe the programmers of the AI don't want to scare people into thinking that AI is going to take over. So they've put some programming in it to make it sound like we're never going to go into your territory. You'll always be creative when we're not capable of that. I thought that was pretty interesting. I talked to Gemini of the Google chatbot. And then also, so then I did some prompting because I wanted to get ideas. I wanted to try different layouts for my composition. And I have never done a robot before, so I wanted to see, let's see, what does a robot really look like? Ordinarily, before AI, I would have just gone on the internet and just Googled robots and looked at robots. So I don't really see that this is that different. It's just more convenient than it was before because I can tell the prompt bot exactly what I want, the AI bot exactly what I want, and then I can refine it as we go and more of this and less of that. And so I settled on the idea of what I wanted to do, and most of this image is mine. I did it, but I did keep the painting that the robot's doing, and that's because I really liked it, and I thought it was so appropriate and kind of funny because it looks sort of like an apocalyptic image, and I thought that was sort of appropriate since there's so much controversy about AI. I thought it would be kind of funny and ironic. And also I wanted to be sure to show the robot painting in a sort of traditional artist studio, you know. I did alter the way he paints. If you'll notice on the finger, he's got a little attachment that attaches to his finger. I don't know, hers, its. I don't know why I keep calling him. The robot's got a little attachment with a brush on it. So when the robot wants to paint, it's got this tool that it can attach. Oh, thank you. That's good. And then I thought, well, you know, artists need several brushes. So I added some more brushes to the right there. Can you see? Yeah, right there. I added a couple more attachments that he can change. It can change, you know, different sizes of brushes and whatnot. So just some fun things I did. But so, yeah, I did use inspiration to formulate this image from the AI images that I got from prompting, but I significantly altered any AI imagery that I used in this image. And so it's uniquely my vision, my design, my painting, my technique. So I don't feel that using AI as a tool diminished in any way my creativity or originality in this image. I mean, it's the same as if I use photographs, which I significantly alter my photographs, or filters, photo editing software. I don't see it. I use other artists' work as inspiration for what I do, so I don't feel so conflicted as I'm hearing from some of you. But also I want to say to Jack, I love that aspect of luck, or as Joe says, surprise. I mean, that's what makes art fun for me and interesting, is that those little things you do that turn up something totally surprising and unexpected. That's what makes art fun for me to do. And I think that's an important factor in art. And everything Greg said, I agree with. The conflict about, is this mine because I used AI? But I think if you've significantly altered it and used it as an inspiration, how is it any different from the tools you used before? AI makes it a lot more convenient, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. All
I
right.
had a lot of fun doing this image. And I think our artists would enjoy using AI just to explore ideas, because sometimes the AI prompt will come up with something you hadn't thought about. And you go, oh, that's interesting. Another one of those lucky surprises.
Yeah. Yeah, I made the comment a while back that if any artist says that they, have this mental block or they can't produce anything, I'm like, boy, this is a tool. Even if you didn't do anything, if you just like, especially with Mid Journey, if you jumped into Mid Journey and just started scrolling through what people are doing, you'd be inspired. You'll never run out of stuff to do. It's just amazing. All right, thanks, Joe.
Truly.
We were going to open this up for questions at the end, but while we're here, I wanted to ask you something. You had said that you made some changes outside of using the AI pieces. What techniques or what tools do you use to make those changes? Say like in the
I
robot.
use Photoshop.
Oh, okay.
I use Photoshop for creating my image. So I paint, I use filters, effects, and a lot of just manipulation, with my
Okay.
tablet.
All right. I'm sure we'll get more into the hows and the whys when we get everybody finished here and we open it up to the group to ask some questions. All right. Next up is Eric.
Well, this is very simple, and that's one of my points, is that if you look at AI art, and most of it, a lot of it is very complicated, but don't be afraid. You can use it in simple ways and kind of start by just dipping your toe in the water, and that's what I was doing here. This rubber band was just sitting on my desk, and I thought it had kind of a sculptural quality to it. And my original idea was to use AI to give it a metallic finish and then find a picture of a city park and put it in the park and make it look like it was 10 feet long and 8 feet high or something. So that's where I started. And I probably went through 15 different prompts, and then the lower one popped up, and I was very pleasantly surprised and thought it was great fun to take something simple like a rubber band on the desk and make it into something kind of, I think, is graceful and elegant. So I guess my message is for anybody out there that doesn't know much about it, just go ahead and start simple. The one main point is that when I applied the AI art, I did it in a very low strength. I started like at 2% and trying to get the texture to look metallic, and then I slowly raised it, and I think my the end percentage was the AI art was used at about 8%. So that's really important for me, that you don't have to just use it full bore 100%. You can use it very subtly to just make slight modifications to kind of give it a flavor. So that's what this is all about.
All right. Yeah. So the before on top, the after below there, seeing the
Yes.
results. That's great. I love seeing where it came
Yep.
from. And I love your idea, the idea of actually creating something new from an existing photograph. So that idea that it doesn't necessarily come from somebody else's work. I mean, there's probably parts of it in terms of using AI, but really great that it started from your own image. So that's a pretty cool idea. All right, thanks, Eric.
Okay.
And then Joe, you got some splaining to do here.
Well, I do have this niche called photography, and I have thousands of photographs just lying around on my hard drive, what have you. And the question is, well, what do I do with all of them? Even if I exhibited with the Photo Arts Group one image every month, I'd probably be exhibiting it for 100 years if I could last that long. So, but it would be the same. It would be a photograph. And, what's wrong with a photograph? You have a good photograph, fine, stop. Don't do anything further. But sometimes just you say, well, how could I repurpose it? And this is where I fell into uh, what I could do in Stable Diffusion. Um, Steve Burns helped me kind of think through getting this new platform. I had to invest thousands of dollars to get a gaming processor. I couldn't use it on my old computer that I had Photoshop on. I needed something much more powerful. And also I didn't want to go out to the internet to have my images out there. I wanted to do it on my computer. So there was a process not only of what I do with the photograph, but having the tool set, the power that I wanted to use it at that would make it meaningful. I tried briefly Midjourney. I wasn't happy with it, didn't find a home there. And I've tried a number of other ones to get more simple kinds of image variations from DALL-E 2, now DALL-E 3, and OpenAI Art, and Firefly. And so they do have a standard kind of, we maybe talk about more of this a little bit later on, where if you just use a text prompt approach, it gets a certain sensibility that this is AI art. So how do I do something that's different? So in Stable Diffusion, they have this one where you can upload your own image, and one of the algorithms is called upscale. And I liked it because it kept the exact same structure of your photograph. And I looked at some of my other art here, I've kept the exact same structure of the image as a photograph out in the world, but I may have changed it to say using, say, digital infrared photography. So it's the same structure, but it changes all the lighting around in ways that you wouldn't anticipate it. So here in upscale, in tandem with some other algorithms, it threw all this crud on the image. I don't know if you could make it a little bit larger there. I tried to make it a little bit larger, but if we could take a little closer look at the crud that's on the image here, I never would have thought of putting that on a photograph. And if I tried to copyright it, the copyright office would say, okay, you can copyright the photograph, but all of that extra crud that's on it, that's excludable material because that is not copyrightable. And in a way, it's a good idea. It's a good thing because no other person would want this kind of crud that's tailored to this particular photograph. So I've created my own filter in effect that only works on one photograph. And that's the one here. So that's been part of one pathway of exploration that I've been using, and I thought it would be helpful for this particular exhibit to show, again, within the photographic dimension or channeling of what one does with that particular images, and then repurpose it in ways that were unanticipated. So maybe, I don't know, with Jack, might say, well, that's luck. Yeah, okay, there is luck, but just like throwing paint, but you have to do it creatively, and I'm using this, and I pick and choose what type of crud is on there. Then I take it back, that image, back into Photoshop, and I have to blend it together, montage it together at different levels of opacity with using different filters and colors to integrate those images. And sometimes I will use 4 or 5 different images that I create in Stable Diffusion to blend together with my original image. Or I might start with a text prompt image and then take that into Stable Diffusion and then interpolate that as well. So it seems to be that there is a multitude of different ways of playing with this. Now, not all of it's satisfactory. Some of it's wasted time. And I've just said, oh, I've got to have another cup of coffee and do something else. But sometimes it works. And I felt on this particular comparison, it made sense to me aesthetically. And perhaps we could later on talk about our vision as what is, quote unquote, good art, which obviously we have different understandings of that. This also, I would add, is an inductive approach of playing with something to end up with a particular adventure, as opposed to, say, a Kaz Maslanka approach, which seems to be more of a deductive approach. He has a formula, a concept to which he then brings images into that to evoke that particular image. So again, we may approach our art making in different ways.
And speaking of Kaz, he has just dropped in. And as luck would have it, it looks like my bridge program has locked up. So let me see if I can actually end this. I'm going to have to relaunch bridge, I guess. So hang on. These things happen, right? All right. So welcome, Kaz. We took the liberty of already talking about your image. It was the first one up, but if you want to add anything to it, obviously we could not do the mathematical poetry any justice. So I think you are welcome.
The math on it is not that difficult, but well, it basically says that nature is to the garden as the despot is to the slave. So that's one way that everybody can approach it. Or you can solve it differently, as nature is to the despot as garden is to the slave. And I just caught the tail end of Joe talking about that my approach is, it's definitely, I already know what I want before I even start. I don't start with AI prompting something and then something comes up and then I respond. That's not my method. I have a clear vision of what I want, and that's one of my frustrations with AI, is that it's very difficult to get your vision manifested with prompts. It takes a lot of prompting, and then you've got a lot of times you've got to make some sacrifices, or just forget it. It's like, no, I'm just, it's not working, and then move on. But anyway, I don't really have much of anything else to say, except that I'm not wearing my bass shirt today for you, Larry. I'm wearing my regular guitar shirt.
All right. Let's see. So we did Joe. Oh, so then it's me. So I wanted to show a little bit more about kind of how some of the people already have about how I got to the final image. And so the final image is on the right-hand side that was in the show. It's called Guardian of the Sacred. The idea here was that, so I kind of entered into this process the same as a lot of people were talking about, and that was like jumping in to Midjourney and typing in some prompts and seeing some results, and was just like, wow, this is amazing, and type in some more prompts and see some more results. And it's very kind of addictive and very seductive, and then because I've been doing, creative things my whole life, it was real easy for me to like go, wait a minute, this really doesn't feel that creative. So that first, day in there, I started looking at it and thinking like, well, geez, if I had an idea for something an image that I wanted, and I went to a painter and I commissioned them to do a painting for me based on my prompt, they would create this painting. And I thought about, I went and pick up my painting after I had commissioned them to do this. I would not feel like I could walk out of the person's studio and hold it up to the world and go, look what I did. And that's kind of the response that I had about this, like putting in a prompt and getting an image. But there was still something about the process that was pretty magical. And kind of what I said earlier, I'm anxious to see what more and more people do with it as they start to get more creative with it. And so I love doing photo composites. And many times I'm like stuck trying to figure out what I can add to my own photographs, or if I have an idea, I don't quite know where to go with it from there with my own images. And in this case, the way that the image was put together was it's actually two different AI images that were generated, the upper image and the bottom image over on the left. And both of them were created using prompts where I was talking about creating a portal to another world or another universe or something like that, and was coming up with these sort of portal ideas. And then ended up using the two of those together with the sleeping man there as my photograph, and the flowers my second photograph. And then you'll also see that there are some of the orange glow here was added in Photoshop, and some of the down glow was also added in Photoshop. And I thought, this is really, I think, the amazing thing about this for most of us, or me at least, being a photographer and having had experience in Photoshop for a lot of years. It's like bringing that, kind of like what Greg was talking about, bringing that sort of expertise together with this idea of getting images together. And so right away when I started doing this, it felt way more collaborative. And that's the way I love looking at this. This is like a collaborative process, and for me, it was like if I was working with another photographer or a painter, then, and said, "Hey, do you want to collaborate on a project? Why don't you paint me a background, or you do a background and give it to me, and I'll put my image on top of yours." The great thing about this collaboration is my collaborator never tells me what to do. It never says, "Oh, you ruined my piece." So I get to do whatever I want. But then I thought, well, it'd be interesting in conversation. So I asked the AI to show me their signature, and it ended up coming up with these 4 different kind of chop things, like the one you see on the right hand side here. And so I picked out the one that I really liked, and then I took my chop and put them together. And you'll see down in the lower right hand corner, every time I make a print from an image that I've generated using AI as a sort of a collaboration, I put both of our chops down in that lower right hand corner. My feeling is that I'm not trying to make any pretense here that this is entirely my own image, that this is really something that I, like I said, working in collaboration with artificial intelligence. But this ability now to do photo compositing with an unlimited resource of material is just phenomenal. I mean, I'm more excited right now about working than I have been in a lot of years. And so I have several projects that I'm working on doing collaborative pieces and compositing together. So that's mine. All right, let me jump out of there, I think. And last up will be Mr. Stephen Burns.
All right, so I guess that's me. Is my microphone working pretty well?
Sounds good.
Oh, great, fantastic. Okay, well, hello everybody. I'm Stephen Burns. I think I've known many of you here. You've been involved with the Photoshop Users Group for a long time. It's always been an honor to be involved in the community as a whole, just to see how everybody has grown over the years. It's just fantastic to see many artists I see exhibiting today started at the user group and was just learning, and now you guys are like pros. so it's so good to see, what I saw at the gallery at the Escondido Arts Partnership. The quality of the work is just phenomenal. This piece is called Tied to the Abyss, and I used a variety of programs to produce this. As most of you know, I've been in Photoshop and involved with Adobe for a long time, but I'm also have been involved in other types of media, like 3D printing and 3D design. And I think that's the thing that's always excited me in terms of being a digital artist, is just how this stuff keeps changing and growing into other tools that I can go and explore to be able to express myself uniquely. And AI is just another one of those tools. It's like it's one of the newest tools now that we have to express ourselves. I've listened to everybody's feelings about AI and how it's integrated, how integrating it into work either makes them feel more excited about what they're going to produce, or makes them feel as if they don't that what they're creating is not completely theirs because of the use of AI. Um, I've always been a real stickler about using my skill sets. I spend a lot of time studying and learning about 3D design and 3D printing and digital painting and photography, and and I've gotten to a point in my career where I take all those things and I blend them together to to speak a whole new language. So now AI comes along, and I found it quite fascinating. And the way I have always created and the way I've always produced my work was to be inspired by other artists like yourselves. And I look at what you guys are doing and I'm thinking, wow, I never thought about that. Maybe I should explore this little avenue or that little avenue. So AI has been another form or another tool in terms of challenging me creatively as to how I should consider or a direction I should consider going in terms of creating. So Tied to the Abyss was created using a bunch of different programs. It's not just Photoshop. It was used along with Photoshop. I used Blender 3D. I used Substance Painter 3D. I used ZBrush Sculpting 3D. Then, of course, I already mentioned, already mentioned Photoshop. So I figured, you know what? If I use AI, because right now AI is restricted to the 2D realm. It's slowly making its way into the 3D realm. I already have 3D AI plugins for my Blender 3D program, which I've been exploring. It's not quite there yet. But right now, it seems like the AI tools that we have has effectively, it's used the 2D perspective, the 2D world quite well. So if I get a loss for ideas, I go to the museums or the galleries, or I go somewhere to look at fellow artists' work to inspire me to create differently. So that's why I figured that's what I'm going to use AI for. So what I created was something that was inspired by AI. I used prompts. I used several different prompts. I mean, I had my initial way to go with this piece was not what you see here. It was completely different. I had an idea as to how I wanted to go based on some of the prompts that I produced, some of the AI images. For example, I wanted something serene, almost Zen-like, but yet I didn't want it to be real busy in terms of the overall content. So I used prompts that produced like maybe a tree in a hazy, foggy forest, as another way of trying to produce minimalism. A tree and water. I love the tree and water. I love the reflection that was going on with the trees and water. The trees on protruding rocks from the water, producing reflections. I'll put in code words or prompts similar to that, and got some and achieved some very, very interesting results. So something came to me and says, you know what? I really want to show what AI can do if I use it as an inspiration for the purposes of using my personal skill sets to produce something that's unique to me. So that was what this piece is, and I'm pretty happy with it. I didn't expect the work in this direction. The way I work, unlike Kaz, where Kaz knows where he's going to go, he knows what he wants from the very beginning. He's a brilliant mathematician, so that's his choice. That's his way to work. I prefer to work where I don't know where I'm going. I have no idea where the piece is going to end up. So I'm going to allow the prompts to produce something to spike my imagination, to create something, to explore in other avenues in my programs. So everything that you see here is created from scratch. The character is not a pre-made 3D character. I actually sculpted that character in ZBrush. And then I started the initial character in Blender 3D. Then I imported into ZBrush, which is a 3D for sculptors program. I can sculpt it out in the program, add the texture, add the cracks to the body, get it exactly the way I want it, and then I'll export it back out into Blender 3D, which is where I build the diorama. So I was able to build rock structures for the background. I was able to build the textured rock structures that the character is protruding out of, but it wasn't enough. So I did some more prompting, like what would make this more interesting than the guy just pose off the top of a rock. So I saw this. I did a prompt where it produced a bunch of like spider webbing lit from behind, and I thought, that webbing is really cool. Could I do that in Blender 3D? And I found a way to do it. So I decided to use the tying ropes on the character, scope them off the character so it touches the ground in such a way that I was hoping to get a successful 3D print. The 3D print was a last minute thing. I didn't plan to do that. I worked so hard, got the piece done or close to done, and I felt, wow, I really like this. And I thought, hell, I got the 3D piece. I have the 3D prints. Why not print it out just to show everybody what more can be done with these other mediums if you include 3D? So I went ahead and sculpted out. That sculpture that you saw at the gallery should be much bigger. The bigger piece just finished today. I'm going to go swap it out. So if you happen to be in the area again, go stop by the gallery and check out the larger piece. And yeah, I mean, I feel pretty happy with it because I chose to use AI as a source of inspiration rather than just including what AI produces as part of the final piece in the creation. Just to sum it all up, I just wanted to, I'm excited about my skill sets. I'm excited about using 3D and sculpting and Photoshop and photography and all that stuff. So I wanted to keep using it. And the only way to do it was just to use the AI prompts as an inspiration, put that inspiration in my brain and regurgitate it back out into my own unique work. So that's all for me. So hopefully I didn't talk too long.
Thanks so much, Steve. Great.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I love the idea that you created the 3D piece. And it was also interesting to find out the order that you did it in, right? Just because I kind of thought, oh, maybe did the 3D piece, photographed it, made the piece, but actually creating the 3D piece after you had generated or created the image is an interesting idea. So yeah, Steven's got more skill sets than anybody I know. All right. So at this point, Joe, do we want to open it up for comments or questions? And you're muted, Joe.
Okay. I gave a talk recently at the San Diego Public Library and on trying to figure out where the artist is in an AI world. And fortunately, I got some comments. They weren't quite nasty, but they were provocative in terms of challenging the premise. And I think that's an important thing that we might start with is some of the key challenges that face us. And we have a range of different approaches to using generative AI. So let me just tick those off, and then maybe we could jump into some of these discussions. Some we touched on a bit. The first one is, where is the human element? Where is the me? And that's important because some galleries, like the fair, said these are not your pixels. Therefore, if we can't figure out where your pixels are, you're not an artist in our framework. The Copyright Office uses a similar framework that if it's excludable material, so like, for example, a copyright only lasts for, 75 years of the life of an artist plus a number of years, and then it expires. So all of Rembrandt's work, none of them can be copyrighted. So they're trying to figure out what kind of categories that are excludable. So far, AI work is fit into that excludable category. So that's where the question, where is the humanity, where's the human element in figuring it out what we're doing? So I think that's still open question. Some people see it as two alike, that AI art, especially on some of the platforms like Firefly or DALL-E 3, what have you, comes out with a very similar flavor or presentation, and maybe it's only because we're, as artists, not putting in significant enough prompts to make it different. So one of the things that I do when I talk to individuals about doing prompts is don't put in a prompt like a camel on the moon. Put in a prompt like you take part of a sonnet, take part of a proverb out of the Bible. Put that prompt in there, something really bizarre, and then see what comes up. So I think maybe part of the problem of how we use this two alike is our problem in terms of what we're putting in there. Now this goes back to what Don Archer was saying about, well, fractals as algorithms, you put in numbers, and generative AI, you're putting in words instead of numbers. But it's not quite the same thing, because what we're getting back is trained on the work of lots of other folks. I don't think numbers are trained on anybody else. Also, the question, words have connotations, connotative meanings. Words are messy compared to numbers, at least in my mind. Obviously, if you're a mathematician, you can find messy the mathematical systems, but the way ordinary language is used comes up with all sorts of odd things, and we've seen that in some of the bizarre responses that some of the platforms have generated, and now they have to go in and put in certain kind of policies or guidelines to protect us from what is being outputted. So there's that whole other kind of question of what we're inputting as words and what are words meaning. A third one is that the process is different in making art. Does that make a difference? So if I use a paintbrush as opposed to using sand or a rag, or if I'm using a tablet to create art, what difference does it make? I'm using different tool sets. Is AI just simply another tool set, and what's the big deal about using one tool versus another tool? So that's kind of another question area. And then finally, whether we accord certain kinds of generative AI more betterness, whatever you want to say. If it's text prompt, it's less qualifiable as human art making than, say, collaborative or hybrid approaches where you merge, say, a painting with AI or photography with AI. So is there a step ladder, or is it all the same stuff? So anyway, those are four areas I think that are challenges to us, or at least that I saw it came to me in reading that comment at the public library. And I think they're all good questions that worth exploring.
So I'll say also, if you look, for those of you who've been on GoToMeeting for the first time, if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a little raise my hand thing. So maybe if everybody doesn't just start shouting out, things that they want to do, then we can call on people if they want to speak. First hand up, Kimball. Make sure you unmute yourself.
Hi there. Well, first of all, I'd like to preface this that I'm an oil painter, so very traditional. And so I made notes on a different page. I think it's really interesting, the consideration of AI being a tool versus a medium. And there was some discussion earlier, I think it was Stephen who mentioned he goes to the museum for inspiration. So what's the difference between using AI as a tool, such as changing the color or inspiration for something, versus using it as an actual photograph, such as the gentleman who has the paint tubes and used the background photograph or image that it created, more as like a mixed media. So I think there's sort of these different levels, if you will. I'm not really sure if there's a question in there so much as just trying to separate out the way in which AI can be applied and sort of divided out. I
like your analogy or the initial question about it, whether it's a tool or a medium. I think it's a great thing, I think, to think about, because there is a sense that, and I know because I had several conversations with different people, and we're always trying to, like what Joe said, the messiness of words. We're always trying to either cling to previous definitions, create new definitions, and use definitions to dismiss other things, by that way. So I think it's an interesting idea because definitely it can be looked at as a new medium, that's for sure. But I think more like, I think what you're saying too is then if you're using it in conjunction with painting or photography or sculpture or something else, then yeah, it kind of becomes a mixed media then. And I think that's actually a pretty good approach.
I think one of the initial uses of AI as a media has been in the commercial industry, is where everybody used it to produce some imagery that they can put on coffee mugs or plates and scarves and sell it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think that, of course, that's not what our discussion is about, but just throwing it out there that yeah, the initial use for it, because I see it all the time. I've had people call me to ask me questions on how to better make more money with AI just by using prompts. So
yeah,
sure.
So Greg, go ahead.
I think it's, as far as a medium versus a tool, I don't know that there's, a medium is a substrate plus a tool, a brush and a piece of paper. And I don't know that there's that much distinction between the two. And it's all about how you use whatever tools you have. And if you look at this screen right now, you look at all of these different pictures, and all of us have very different approaches that we've used in these images. They don't all have any particular style, because we have brought our creativity, our approach, whether our approach is more from a photographic standpoint or an illustrative standpoint, and the more we put ourselves into the process, I think the more the AI recedes into the background as a tool in the medium that we use, which is digital art or photography. Most of this involves Photoshop on some level, which we've all been using for a number of years, which the medium is Photoshop, and one of the tools in Photoshop, inside Photoshop and outside of Photoshop, is AI, which we can integrate into the way we make art.
Yeah. All right, Kaz had his hand up. Then after Kaz, David G will be up. Go ahead, Kaz.
Yeah, I did not see where you can raise your hand electronically here.
Right.
I'm looking around, but find it. But anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit about, when you're talking about medium, to me, this is, medium is digital. And we can mix the technologies together. I mean, we can do a painting, shoot a photograph of it, bring it into Photoshop, composite some AI with it. You can do mixed technologies, but ultimately, when you have something that's in a digital format, then the medium is digital. Now, what Joe was talking about, it's no big deal whether you use a paintbrush or whether you use pixels or whatever. I think it is a big deal. When it comes to the medium, painting requires tremendous practice to become proficient. When you're doing prompting, that's not something that there's no physical interface with the body. There's a physical interface with the body when you're painting. The digital part is a mental process. It's design. And I know we like to call ourselves artists when we do digital art, but of course, as a lot of you don't know me, but the ones that do know me know that I have a more narrow vision of what art is. And I have no problem with talking about design and elevating design. To me, I love to look at a great design, and I hate looking at bad art. So it's not like art is elevated, and I really have a problem with everyone using the word art as a value judgment, because that presupposes there's no such thing as bad art, and we know that there is bad art. So anyway, I did wanted to get on the soapbox there for a second, so I'll pass it on.
All right. Thanks, Kaz. David G. Not hearing David G.
That's David Good, I think.
So David, either you're not muted, but I don't hear, maybe your mic is not connected.
No.
All right.
Sometimes,
Well, so I'll just say for David or anybody, if for whatever, if you don't get sound or you're not able to talk to us, then try logging out and coming back in, because you're not going to lose your spot. You'll be able to get back in. Sometimes that helps. All right.
Oh, see back.
All right.
You can also write questions in the chat.
Yeah, you can throw something in the chat if you want to.
Excuse me, just one second.
Sure.
I forgot one thing I wanted to add in. When we're talking about the levels of difficulty in painting, sculpture, any of the fine arts, when we're dealing with prompting and stuff like this, things that are really easy to do technically, and there's a lot of things that are really easy to do, I think that puts greater demands on the conceptual elements of what you're trying to express. And I think people should take that into consideration is if it's really easy to do, then you really need to put some conceptual effort into it and say something that's of some sort of importance in our society. But that's just, again, my opinion. All right.
So David did put a comment in, says the decision that only humans can copyright predates AI. Yeah, I've always felt like I think we're still in process of trying to figure out, whether or not we are going to be able to copyright anything, because the copyright was written before AI was around. They just haven't changed their mind yet. There's some things like a little bit like what Joe said. There are people who have done like graphic novels where they've written the text, but they used AI to generate the images. And so like Joe was saying with his image, now they want to separate it. Well, okay, you can copyright the text, but you can't copyright the images, which I don't know, seems a bit absurd, but again, I think we're just sort of in the middle of trying to redefine it. So then David says it goes back to a photographer's camera was stolen by stolen by a monkey who took selfies, and it went through the courts, and the decision was the monkey is not human. So yeah, and Kimball says that is correct. Something about a primate taking a camera and taking a photo. There's also the other example too of the elephant who paints, right? That's also not copyrightable. But and that was actually a really good part of the discussion, I think, at the San Diego Fair when they brought in the lawyer who's a copyright attorney, and I think he had a lot to add to the discussion, and I made the point too that all the years that I have done art, I've never intentionally applied for a copyright for anything I've ever done. Yes, the argument is if you've created it and the day that you've created it, if it's documented somewhere, you can still call that a copyright. But the weird thing about copyrights too, and he kind of did reiterate this idea that the only way you're going to be successful in a copyright lawsuit is proving damages. And most of us are in the world doing art. So many of us are, really amateurs at this. Nobody's making a fortune off of their art. It would be very hard to show damages. And so that's another part of the whole legal part of being able to copyright something or not.
Yeah, I'd like to give a different perspective.
Yeah.
Let's assume that there's no such thing as copyright. It's a relevant metric. And it had been for a long time. It's only a recent, really, invention. Yep. We really had guilds that were protecting the secrets of how people put things together. And let's use the metric instead of a curator. The curator makes a decision of what goes into an exhibit or not. So I was sitting on an airplane next to this guy, and I was talking about art, and he said, I'll have to tell you a story. I submitted a sculpture to this very kind of I guess it was a summer festival in London. And his sculpture, they sent him a letter of acceptance, but they didn't accept the sculpture. They accepted the plinth, the base upon which the sculpture was, because the sculpture had fallen off of its base, and they thought it would really need to accept the And so to him and to me, you often get curators who come up with these absurd ideas of what goes into an art exhibit. Now, whether it's copyrightable could be irrelevant or pertinent depending on the frame of discussion. We shouldn't get locked into, is it copyrightable?
There's nothing absurd about that situation, Joe. When it comes to the plinth was probably more beautiful than the sculpture. The sculpture was some and the plinth was finely crafted in such a manner that it was had a minimalist quality that fit in with a certain aesthetic of the curators. I see nothing wrong with that.
No, that's but I saw a picture of the two when it was in the paper, because it made the papers too, and I would beg to differ with you on that.
So every one of these images is so uniquely done and crafted by each of us as artists, whether we used AI or not. It's like I'll speak to my piece. So I used a lot of different images, and they are not. None of them were the original. There's almost nothing there that's really the original thing that was rendered by AI, because things are layered together. They've been altered. The colors altered. I've used AI tools without prompts, so it's so unique from anything that was originally rendered by Midjourney that it's like it would be easy for me to copyright these images if when I submit a copyright, it's as a piece that would ask for the medium. I say digital art or digital composition. And now that might change in terms of what that is, but how is the Copyright Office going to spend time or know that this was rendered with AI or Photoshop or some composite? I don't have to describe my whole process to them when I submit for copyright. that copyright is given. If I send in the copyright form, put the art in there, and then somebody steals my image and uses it for an advertisement, I can go after them because they took something that I copyrighted and which was my unique image. And I don't think this whole issue of copyright applies to hybrid images much at all, unless you're actually really stealing something off of, if Midjourney rendered something that was clearly belonging to Mr. X, it stole his image and it didn't alter it at all, and it gave me that, and then I tried to copyright that, then I could be sued, maybe. But he'd have to have it prove damages, like Larry said. He'd have to have some reason for actually spending money on lawyers, and he's not going to get any money out of me because I didn't make any money on it. So it's pretty irrelevant, and I don't think, I don't think it really applies to the idea of what we're talking about within the way that we're working. And every example that I've ever seen talking about copyright is stuff that is mostly purely AI.
Yeah,
And
that's a good. In fact, I'm going to back up on the comments there. Kaz wrote something similar to that idea. Has anyone challenged copywriting a composite image with one's photography, drawing, and AI? It seems that if you do a composite, you should be able to copyright the total composition, but the AI part is not copyrightable. That means someone else could use your AI part, but not the other elements. I'm gonna give Greg the homework assignment to send this image in and see if we can get it copyrighted. I just think,
yeah,
because I think you're right. I wonder. I
thinking-
go, how are they assessing this? Because I just can't imagine if you're getting millions and millions of images or people are submitting.
well,
I'd like-
they could do a search and see what they can.
Well, that's been my
Is it
example
another-
all along is that if you take any AI, a purely generated AI image and do a reverse image search, it always comes back with, we searched 6 billion images and did not find this image anywhere. So that's not the offense. Their offense is that, a man or a human being did not make it. Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, there's an experiment that I'm going to be doing, and I spoke to Greg about this before. Say I create my AI, generative AI image, and I put it onto the screen on my monitor, and then I take a photograph of
Right.
it. Then because photographs are copyrightable. Now, if the photograph is really an exact duplicate of what I have on that they wouldn't give me a copyright for that. It has to be something added to the image. So I could do a kind of an interesting photograph of my generative AI image on the screen, and that should thread the needle of being copyrightable as a photograph. Even though it's
as simple
AI.
as that, you could just layer something else over it in Photoshop and alter it enough that it's not the original AI image. And in every, I think if you the fair use and the ability to alter things has been for decades. For you can make those changes as long as you're making a 20% change or whatever, and that's arbitrary. But as long as you're making the change, you can get away with, unless somebody sues you, you can get away with it. So I still think it's a pretty minor issue in terms of what we're talking about in making art like this hybrid stuff.
Yep.
But I did do that. I did an image that used an AI thing on the screen, but I took a photograph of my computer with the AI image on the screen, and my hands warped like I was going to put this in this show too, but it playing with that idea of what is AI and what is the photograph. You can't photograph a building that is copyrighted, like the design of the Disney Center.
Yeah.
If you take a photograph of the Disney Center, they can sue you if you in certain cases, or the lights on the Eiffel Tower.
Yep.
Even though it's your photograph and your interpretation of those buildings, those entities that own them will go after you, or can go after you, and sue you for copyright infringement. And they have successfully done that.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else we need to touch on, Joe? I mean, I was afraid that we would get caught up in all the legalities of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up. Go ahead, Joe. Yeah, Jill.
So I read somewhere that the AI, when it's programmed, trained, whatever they do, is it's trained to alter the images it gives you. Yeah. And so that could explain in part why some of the images you get are just so bizarrely different than what they should look like. And so it seems to me that that's a way to prevent you getting an actual real piece of art, because it's already altered by the time it gets to you. And the other point I wanted to make is that I put one of my images, one of the AI images I got in to the chat bot, and I said, tell me who the artist is. And it said, I can't find any artist.
Yeah.
So it does seem that they're so altered that they can't really be pinned down to any particular artist. It's
the description that I had heard a long
much.
time ago was this idea that there is this, the generator part of it. If you say, bald eagle, it has, hundreds of thousands of bald eagle images that it could draw from. But the other side of it is what they call the discriminator, that says, no, you can generate a bald eagle, but you can't do one that you have already seen. It has to be new. And it's sort of, again, that sort of predictive nature of how the pixels come together to create something that's new, but still based on that data, which I think is going to end up being the biggest hurdle that they're going to have to come over in the legal issues is, about this stealing art from other people, is that there isn't going to be any way to go, oh yeah, this bald eagle came from that person's photograph, because you can't even figure out where the source is from. So that's
right.
Yeah, it's not the way that the process works. It doesn't take images and copy and paste it. It is like an averaging, a mathematical average of the image. Like Larry's talking about a bald eagle. So it looks for the words bald eagle, then it goes out and it looks at 1 billion images that have the words bald eagle in it, and then it searches through it looking for a statistical relationship between the patterns. It doesn't know what a bald eagle is. It just finds a shape that's similar in all of these images and knows that shape is what we're interested in. And then it does an average of all of that and then blends them together, and you get a bald eagle. Now that bald eagle will probably look very similar to something that somebody's already done, but because it's the probabilities are going to be there. And of course that artist is going to say it stole my bald eagle, but it didn't, because it created it brand new. And that's
Kurt is echoing.
Was that Jimmy Hendrix?
It was in the form of Kurt Lightfoot. Yeah, there was actually an interesting thing. I mean, that's the funny thing about photography in the medium itself, standing in somebody else's tripod holes. And there was an incident at the fair last year where somebody had claimed that somebody stole their photograph of a fox. And when they confronted the person with it, they said, no, I was on the same workshop with this person and we were photographing the same scene side by side. And so even in those situations, right, it's very possible for people to have two photographs that are very close to being identical. Yet, what do you do when you go, no, we both stood there and took the photograph at the same time? Who gets the proper ownership of it? Well, both of you do, obviously, because you're human beings who push the shutter on the camera.
I can think of that one turnout at Yosemite that everybody takes the same picture. You know?
Tunnel view, yeah. I said if there was a problem with standing in tripod holes, we would have all been sued by Ansel Adams a long time ago, or now his estate.
I think another profitable area to discuss is that with this tool set, what other things can we do with it? So I was in the museum and I saw a lot of archaeological finds are incomplete statues.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a picture of this incomplete statue and decided to what it would look like if I tried to complete it with generative fill in successive steps. And I came up with something that's probably not what it was, but it's kind of an interesting process of building something that was incomplete. Now, I would mention that I ran into an article about a painting by Keith Haring, who died, I believe, in 1990 of AIDS. And he did a painting called Incomplete Painting in 1989 that had kind of drips of painting in there. And the whole idea was that this was the situation of people with AIDS back that particular time. They had no way of figuring out where to go from where they were, and that was his sense of incompleteness. So somebody last year decided to use AI tools to complete his incomplete painting and got a lot of blowback from other people who were looking at it. You are just crapping all over the AIDS experience of people dying in the thousands. So there are ethical issues about what we should do or could do, whether we're respecting other people or just simply is it a ethical issue or is it a copyright issue? So there are other ways of looking at how we're using AI tools creatively, but maybe in ways that are unexpected or ways that maybe really kind of should be avoided.
Well, what if somebody were to take an unfinished concerto and write that? Would they be able to be sued for doing an exercise of adding to a piece of existing piece?
Yeah, that has been done already. But if you're taking something by Chopin, which is not copyrightable,
right,
you can do it. But it's only if the person's alive today that might.
I was just going to say that there's been at least 2 different completions of Charles Ives' Universe Symphony by 2 very different composers. Also, I'd like to say I went to the show last week, and I must say I've been very impressed with it. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed the discussion tonight.
All right, Joe, do we have any more dead horses we need to beat?
I think we covered a lot of topics and gave me a lot of food for thinking about what we're doing.
Yeah. All right, well, we thank everybody for joining us tonight and having this discussion. Again, I think it's always this is important because we're in the middle of change, and change is always met with a resistance, and I always love it when other people are willing to go into uncomfortable territory, explore it, share it, talk about it, because if all we do is ignore it, I always wonder too about the people who want to fight against it. Is like, do you really think you can say something that's going to stop this? It's like going to put an end to the whole creation of AI as an art form. All right, so let's wrap this up, and I'll say thanks again, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Larry, and thank you, Joe. Thank you all.